Of course, before speaking on the series' choice of new town setting, Horseshoe Bay, I feel it's important to start by explaining the original Nancy Drew town for those who aren't familiar, so we can draw some comparisons. River Heights is a fictional Midwestern town in Illinois, United States, near Chicago, Titusville, Riverside Heights, and Round Valley. It is the original town created in the Nancy Drew books and games that is the home of Nancy and a lot of our main characters. Within the town, the Drew family is seen in high regard and respect, as Carson Drew is considered one of the best and most reputable lawyers in the area. In the books and games, Carson is either involved in Nancy's cases via legal reasons, or the people Nancy is visiting or helping are people Carson knows or has previously helped himself. The town was founded by Ethan Mahoney and seems to be known for its anvils, of all things. It has multiple newspapers, including Today's Times, for which Brenda Carlton is a reporter, the River Heights Gazette, and Crime Weekly. The deep history of the town isn't delved into too much in the books and games when it comes to founding families and how or why the anvils are what the town is known for. However, so much could have been drawn from this vague description of the town, and if anything, the town could have utilized that to take a mining approach in the storyline versus the maritime and boats aspect they adopted instead. I'll explain this further in my show rewrite ideas. Though I did somewhat like the idea of using fishing and the sea as a strong element in the town, because any use of a main natural element offers a lot the story can get into when it comes to storylines. However, adding the supernatural elements, in my opinion, took away from the realism and washed away the initial love for the Nancy Drew story. Instead, the show is set in a town called Horseshoe Bay, which, like I said, is known for fishing and its maritime traditions. It is a small coastal town in the northern area of the state of Maine. The town has many traditions and festivals centered around their years of boating and fishing. One first introduced in episode 2 is a tradition of tipping over a bucket of seawater. According to legend, if the water has turned to blood by midnight, then the person will die within the next year. No further explanation of this is made in the first season, and it's never truly explained if George or anyone who has tipped over a bucket of blood has actually died, adding no real element of truth to the story aside from inciting a false aspect of danger. Another tradition was created following the death of Lucy Sable in the year 2000. It's said for the newly crowned Sea Queen to place her crown on Lucy Sable's grave, thus explaining our very first scene of the show and a small flashback when Nancy ends up paralleling her deceased mother by being crowned Sea Queen like she did before putting her own crown unknowingly on her own mother's grave. This is an interesting one and likely continued especially once the cause of her death is revealed. However, the implication of Nancy is confusing and I feel was only added for the aspect of symmetry between the mother and daughter characters, both being crowned Sea Queen. It seems a bit odd because Nancy never speaks about it later. It's not seen or even talked about any further than the first scene of the first episode. Nancy also doesn't seem to be the pageant girl type, and her time in pageants is never otherwise seen or discussed in the show. Another special occasion, Harbor Day, celebrates the first ship arriving in Horseshoe Bay. The ship was supposed to arrive in Virginia, but legend goes that a sea creature called the Iglaka pushed the ship off course. Once a year on Harbor Day, you can ask the Iglaka for something. If the Iglaka grants your wish, your eyes will begin to bleed. But the wish also comes with a great price. An odd tradition in my mind because it's centered around a mythical spirit, taking a bit away from the realism, but I guess it fits with the supernatural side of the show. Personally, I'm not a fan of the town change when it comes to the TV show. However, I feel I could have come to love it if it wasn't for all of the supernatural elements and the lack of setting development. I love the talk of the town being founded and created when a ship randomly drifted off course to the wrong destination. I wish this type of founding story was further explained or discovered more, but it's not really discussed any further than the Harbor Day episode. Even the aspect of trying to include ghosts would have worked for me, because likely many people died at sea in a storm or even in other ship crashes. However, I wouldn't personally want the ghosts to be real, but instead have the elements of the spirit set up and created by either a person replicating a haunting to scare someone, or the use of hauntings in dreams or from poisoning, similar to the ghost of Thornton Hall. This, of course, would then add to the realism while also still trying to make the audience think the characters are being haunted. And of course, if the show wanted to be established in a new town, I just wish they had spent more time developing the story of how Horseshoe Bay came to be, like explaining the use of the founding families, i.e. the Marvins, Hudsons, and who else. We don't even know if there's more founding families besides the two because they're never spoken about. In my head, likely the mayor or even someone on the police force should have been made to be a part of a founding family as well. Maybe the Raleighs if the show hadn't made one of them a villain. That type of story and dynamic adds its own and different kind of intrigue that could attract an audience. Supernatural stuff, yes, can be scary and eye-catching at times, but the realism and craziness of family dynamics I personally think would have been a better touch and would have drawn more audience in. It's explored slightly in Ryan and Bess's interactions with their own founding families. However, it's not focused on enough, and instead cast to the background in place of random ghostly and scary moments. Now, moving on to that very topic, I personally don't understand the want or need for any supernatural elements in a Nancy Drew show. Don't get me wrong, scares, monsters, and ghostly mysteries are all a part of the Nancy Drew brand. However, similar to Mystery Incorporated, all of the villains and enemies in the Nancy Drew stories turned out to be real people, adding a true layer of mystery and fear to the stories because it could literally be anyone, and likely someone we already know. Though no one can beat the mechanics used to create the Banshee and Nancy Drew haunting of Castle Malloy, I do feel some classic old man-made jump scares could have worked. Nancy in the show explains very early on that she doesn't believe in curses, superstitions, or ghosts, along with many other of our main characters. Yet, within a matter of 2 to 3 episodes, everyone's opinion has changed, and Nancy has become almost like a super witch, able to contact and see spirits from the other side. Surprise, guys, Nancy is actually the kid from The Sixth Sense. She just looked very boyish as a child. But seriously, a lot of these scares are very clearly played to attract and scare the audience into continuing to watch the show. However, as the mystery slowly unravels, you realize a lot of these jump scares are proved pointless and confusing. It's established that Nancy is being haunted by Lucy Sable to discover who murdered her. Many signs are given to Nancy to try and piece together the cause of Lucy's death, or to just scare Nancy. Teeth falling out for some reason, seaweed down the throat, attacking Ryan with a ring that implies Tiffany's death was caused by Lucy's, which, I mean, kind of, but, no. Not in the slightest. It's discovered that Lucy killed herself after being relentlessly bullied at school and by Ryan's family, along with her secret pregnancy, all leading to Lucy deciding to take her own life after giving birth. Which, why? I somewhat understand the dynamics of her family, although it's never fully fleshed out and explained much about her family life and growing up with her mom and Josh after her dad's death. Either way, it seems a bit odd to me, the choice to immediately give up her child and end her life, rather than possibly run away with the child, or any other option a teen, a lawyer, and a social worker could think of. Wouldn't you think after giving birth you would then have something to live for? But back to my point. All of these scares later proved to show no real purpose because no one murdered Lucy, and Tiffany's murder was an accident. If the writers desperately wanted to stay with this ghost narrative with Nancy, I believe it would have made more sense to preface it as Nancy having visions or a connection to Lucy from some past memories she has about her parents hiding things from her. Slowly, Nancy's memories could open more and the ghostly figures changing from a ghost to a memory where Nancy finally understands her true origin. But the supernatural beings, of course, didn't just stop at ghosts. Oh no. The Igleca is introduced in episode 15 and is explained to be a sea spirit, once a French heiress named Odetta, who was murdered aboard a ship called the Governess. Her body dropped into the ocean, turning her soul into the sea spirit somehow, now known as a legend in the Horseshoe Bay. It's told that when summoned, she will grant you a wish, but a toll must be paid, or she will have the person killed within 7 days. Huh. Sounds similar to a certain movie I was terrified of as a child. In this first season, Nancy and her friends summon the Igleca to retrieve the bones of Lucy Sable. Still not sure why they weren't recovered by the police when she died, but okay. When trying to pay the toll, Owen Marvin is attacked, and the crew breaks the connection with the sea creature, believing to have cursed them all now. Given my distaste for the show, I know there's further information on this character in the coming seasons, but I just don't care to watch the other seasons to find out, honestly. So you'll just have to remain pleased with this very short explanation.
That was the Igleca.
The last supernatural being we meet in the first season is a demon named Simon. Simon is briefly explained to be a demon who is looking for the souls of children. But seriously, who the heck names a demon Simon? I mean, maybe it's a play on Simon Says, but I just don't understand. Anyways, he manipulated Nathan Gomber and Moira to work for him and sacrificed children at the shrine they had built to him. Once again, this and the Igleca addition to the series I believe to be very out of character for the original material, and in my opinion, strays too far away from it for my liking. The supernatural additions seem more like the CW deciding to sprinkle a little bit of the Charm series on Nancy Drew, and just like my feelings on that remake, it is poorly done. Adding supernatural elements can be done, but in creating these constant random supernatural beings, it's turning a beloved town into basically Riverdale meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I know that sounds great in retrospective, but then make that its own show. It's so tiring to see producers reuse old, strong fan bases to try and push their agendas, to squeeze money out of the product without using any of the original charm.
Just out of curiosity, how did you know that Simon was back?
A few nights ago, pain in my scars woke me up. Because of something shifting. Something awakening.
Well, he won't be able to hurt anyone ever again. Because I sent him away.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
As the title says, in this section I'll be discussing the use of the local police in Horseshoe Bay. I will also take the time in this section to discuss a bit about each of the police personnel we met in this season. This series definitely took what I believe is a bit of a modern narrative about how people view the police. In this season, it seems none of the characters have any positive feelings or respect for any of the authority figures. Many of them, including our main protagonist Nancy, being very entitled and rude to Chief McGinnis especially, which to me seems like such a departure from the view of authority in the Nancy Drew books and games. In the books and the games, yes, there are times the police may not be working as hard on the case as our genius teen detective.
St. Louis Police Department.
I'm calling to report a kidnapping.
Is the kidnapping in progress?
No.
Hold on, miss. I'll transfer you to the Missing Persons Unit. Missing Persons, Sergeant Mac Ramsey speaking.
I'm calling to report a kidnapping, no longer in progress.
And who am I speaking with, please?
My name is Nancy Drew.
Okay, Miss Drew. Now, did you witness this kidnapping?
No, but I heard it.
What exactly did you hear?
My friend went into a dressing room. I was out in the hall, and I heard her scream, so I went in after her, but she was gone.
When and where did this happen?
Just now, at the Royal Palladium Theater.
And what's your friend's name, Miss Drew?
Maya Wynn.
No competent kidnapper keeps their captive anywhere near the scene of the abduction. Is there anything else, Miss Drew?
Sergeant, I really don't think we can afford to wait 24 hours.
It's standard procedure, Miss Drew. Unless you can provide us with some evidence that your friend was taken by force, it's 24 hours.
Thanks, Sergeant. I'll call you back when I have the evidence.
You do that.
Bye.
But there are also many times where they are working well and in tandem with Nancy and Carson when it comes to solving the cases that fall into all of their laps. In the original material, Nancy and Chief McGinnis are actually quite close, and though McGinnis in every incarnation is written to have a bit of a rough exterior, he's never rude or disrespectful to Nancy or anyone besides criminals he apprehends.
Hang on, there's someone at the door.
Chief McGinnis?
My hands are tied here, Nancy.
What are you talking about?
Nancy Drew, you're under arrest for arson in connection with the town hall fire.
I had nothing to do with that.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can and will be held against you in the court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney.
This Chief McGinnis I went back and forth on. I think my final conclusion on the character is I love the direction they wanted to go in with this Chief McGinnis, being a man of native descent. The Nancy Drew series has many times before included storylines of people from many different walks of life, and I feel this choice was a welcomed one.
Your home is in direct view of Cadillac's Peak. In my tribe, places within sight of the ocean and mountains are sacred.
However, McGinnis' personality is disappointing for me, and his lack of relationships with, well, anyone is quite disappointing. In the episode where McGinnis helps the team perform a ritual at Nancy's house, we did get a little more details into McGinnis' character and life, but I don't think it was enough. I wish the writers had stayed more true to the original character, keeping his rough and tough exterior. But more than that, this Chief McGinnis is rude to Nancy, and his blackmailing of Ace doesn't seem to fit my idea of the character at all. I would think McGinnis could have Ace as an informant for sure, given Ace's father's ties to the Force previously. However, the use of blackmail I feel really downgrades this character, and adds to the narrative that all of the police in this series are corrupt, evil, and can't always be trusted to do their job honorably. Proof of this narrative further being represented when Laura Tandy goes on a hate rampage of the Force when trying to get answers about her sister's murder. Obviously, I'd be upset too if the police were not doing their job properly, but this is why I don't like the narrative at all. Not to mention that Ack goes unreprimanded for breaking laws of possibly trying to incite a hate mob and undermine the police's authority. Instead, the masses seem to cheer and think Laura is some hero for what she did.
I saw your publicity stunt. Not bad.
There are also many instances that make you question how good the Horseshoe Bay police force are. Like when the hair sample on Lucy's crown isn't discovered until years later by a teen detective seems a bit unlikely. Also the fact that everyone is said to know where Lucy died and knows where her body had washed away, but the police never tried to retrieve the corpse to solve her murder. They could easily troll the bay to find the body, but they just don't. It seems very confusing to me. Aside from Chief McGinnis, the only other two members of the local police force that we really get to know are Officer Raleigh and Officer Karen Hart. Karen's character being explored more given her ties to Catherine, Carson, and Lucy. However, the basis of both of these officers is the same. Officer Raleigh is only really explored in the episode where he's revealed to have been working for the Hudsons to injure or kill Laura Tandy to stop her hate mob against them and the police force. I'll discuss this character and his interesting ties to the original material in a later section, but for this part of the discussion, I'll merely say I don't appreciate the writers making him and all of the police characters we met corrupt and evil. What kind of police force are we going to be left with after all of this? Not long after Officer Raleigh's corruption is discovered, Officer Hart's involvement in Tiffany's murder with Josh Dodd is also discovered. She as well is taken away and arrested. 2 down, 1 to go. By the end of the season, it's also revealed that Chief McGinnis has resigned from his position as a janitor or maintenance man scratches away at his name on the chief's office door. McGinnis himself also delivering the news to Ace that he's decided to leave. And shattering my heart. I loved this character and his relationship with Nancy and Carson in the original stories. I wish the writers had seen the potential in this character especially, and had allowed the relationship between he and Nancy to develop further to help with the cases they worked on together, but also separately. The narrative of the police being incompetent, I feel, went too far to try and show us that there's only one person who could save the day, and that's Nancydrew. And although I love when Nancy saves the day, I also know it's never completely on her own, and it's often done only with the help of her friends and connections with experts she meets along the way. I wouldn't have minded if the story had made some of the police force corrupt, because that itself is a realistic narrative. The police force, like any job, is full of good and bad people, and they could have outlined that without ruining all of their police characters. I would have loved to see Chief McGinnis retain his honor and loyalty in his position by working with Ace specifically because he knows of the corruption in his force and knows he can't trust some of his officers. So instead, turning to Ace because of the trust he has for Ace and a relationship they could have further developed with Ace's father as well. I feel this would have been a better utilization of the character and emphasized how corruption in the police force does happen, but that there are also good officers working hard to do the right thing, regardless of who they find the criminal is in the end.